That was good. You guys are good. Welcome. My name is Rob Simmelkjaer. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of New York Roadrunners, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to a conversation that I've been looking forward to a long time with Olympic bronze medalist Molly Seidel. I don't believe that Molly needs much of an introduction in running circles, but it's my job to do that anyway, so I'm going to introduce her. Molly is someone who, how many of you have run 3 marathons or more in your career? Okay, that's a lot of you. I've only run 2. I'm trying to run my 3rd this fall. When Molly ran her 3rd marathon, she won a bronze medal in the Olympics in 2021 in Tokyo. So not the way most of us run our 3rd marathons. Molly not only did that, but she also ran the fastest New York City marathon ever run by an American woman. So she has blazed her way through her career as a marathon runner. That was in 2021, and she ran that with cracked ribs. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So with a cracked rib, she ran 2:24:42, which was the fastest ever time by an American woman. She was a 4-time NCAA champion at Notre Dame. She finished as the runner-up in the 2017 Abbott Dash to the Finish Line 5K, and that was one of her first races as a professional athlete. She finished 6th in the London Marathon in 2020. She is a very, very fast woman. So please, a round of applause for Molly Seidel. Molly, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
You and I had an interesting morning. We got to go together. We had an event out at Astoria Park, Queens. It was an open run. Yes, Astoria Park, right under the Triborough Bridge. We had something called an open run for an open mind, which was an event to highlight the connection between mental health and running. And we spoke through some raindrops, a little bit of hail, but we had a great conversation with a great turnout. And Molly, you stood up and you told your story of running, what drew you to running, and what it's meant to you, not just as an athlete, but in terms of your own journey from a mental health perspective. So I want to start by just asking you what you talked about a bit this morning, which is, why did you start running?
Yeah, so honestly, I started running from a pretty young age. Like, I didn't come from a family of runners, but I realized pretty early on that my brain worked a lot better when my body was moving. We had all these woods up behind our house, and I couldn't focus. And so I would go up behind the house, and I would just run with my dog. And I found that after I did that, I would be able to write my essays, I could do my homework, I could sit still for longer than 5 minutes. And just over time, I just developed this deep love of just going out and running. It didn't come from a place of competition early on. I just really liked being in motion. And I begged my mom to let me run track with our local church, and it kind of just took off from there. But I think that's why no matter what struggles I go through, I always kind of keep coming back to just this love of the sport, because I know that my brain works its best when I'm running.
Yeah. Can you describe for folks, and most of the folks here are runners, so they've experienced this, but how does running make you feel? I mean, we talk about this thing called a runner's high, right? Yeah. And a lot of us have experienced it, but for you, what does that mean? What is the feeling you get, whether it's during your run or after the run?
It's tough to describe, but I think the best way I can put it into words is that so often my brain feels too big for my body. Like it feels like my brain is running 1,000 miles an hour, and it doesn't fit into this vessel of my body. And when I go for a run, it feels like my brain and my body match up, and that it's the only time all day that I actually feel like myself. And so it's just such a cool feeling to know, like, just to get that synchronicity that I feel most people probably have normally, but I'm like, I feel like me when I'm running.
I describe it like a sponge, and throughout your day, you kind of get wetter and wetter and wetter, and so you get heavier and heavier and heavier. And for me, the run is like squeezing out the sponge. It gets all of that stuff out, and I feel lighter afterwards. Does that, can you relate to that?
I just feel this sense of like calm. I almost feel like sometimes I'm like, my mind is an engine revving up, and it just lets it slow down. And it's a little bit the opposite feeling of what you've got of like, it just lets me slow down and actually think things through.
I ran cross country in high school, nothing like you run, but I remember distinctly at a young age having a real love-hate relationship with running. You know, I loved it, but it was painful. I don't know, did you ever go through that period of kind of loving and hating running at the same time? And if so, how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, when I got to college, I think transitioning from being a big fish in a small pond, I grew up in Wisconsin. I had a lot of success at the high school level. And then I got to college and suddenly everybody was good. Like I wasn't the like odds on best all the time, and I was getting beat all the time, and I would go into these races and it was just so hard. It was so much harder than it was in high school. And I kept thinking, I'm like, how do I make this easier? How do I make this feel easy again? And it was that thing of just like, I'm sick of being in pain in races all the time. And it wasn't until I kind of had a mental breakthrough going into my junior year when I'm like, this is supposed to be painful. It's not supposed to feel good if I'm doing this correctly. And it was only then that I feel like this switch just flipped in my brain. And I became okay with when I hit that point in a race where it really hurt, rather than shying away from it, I leaned into it a little bit harder, knowing like, okay, like this is the critical point. And once I got past that, I won my first national championship in college.
Amazing, amazing. And you did that another 3 times, right?
Yeah.
So you won 4 national championships. How different did running become for you when you realized you could be among the best, and you started to show up at starting lines with that target on your back, right? People are looking at you. They know who you are. They know that you're the person in that race to beat. Did that change your mentality at all? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think I've gone through periods where it's been harder and easier, because sometimes it comes with a lot of stress and the anxiety, and knowing that people expect certain things of you, I think can be very hard. Sometimes, and even expecting things of yourself. But at other times, I really struggle with self-confidence. I know that seems odd that someone who makes their living doing this would have that, but even now, like, I have the Olympic medal like in my cabinet in the living room, and I still will look at it and I'm like, I don't know if I deserve that. And so it's being able to go to a starting line and know deep down, I'm like, yeah, I deserve to be here. Like, I'm pretty damn good at what I do. That is such a cool feeling that I don't get very often. And I feel like when I showed up to the New York Marathon with the broken ribs, like just having gone through a terrible training block leading into it, I stood on the start line knowing that my prep hadn't been the best. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this stuff. Like, I think I can do this.
You're pretty good.
Yeah.
You're definitely pretty good.
Yeah.
So I want to cut to 2020. You managed to qualify for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. It's all going right for you. You're getting ready for that big event, and then a little thing comes along called COVID, and that Olympics that you'd had circled on your calendar, that you were doing all your prep and everything, your life was driving toward that thing, it was gone. You didn't maybe exactly know when it was going to show up again. What kind of impact did that have on you?
Yeah. Well, so I'll say I got approximately 1 week of feeling like everything was going right between our trials and the Olympics getting postponed. And it was really, really hard. It was so, obviously the pandemic came with so much fear for everyone. My sister and I were living in Boston, and as things were shutting down, and just having no idea what life was going to look like, whether or not the Olympics were going to even happen, whether or not I'd be allowed to keep my spot on the team, or if they'd rerun the trials. And I had this deep anxiety every single day waking up. I'm like, what's the future going to be? What's the future going to be? I can't see where this is going. And the only option I had was like, the one constant I have in my life is running. The one constant I have is going out and every day trying to be a little bit better, and knowing that all I can do right now is put one foot in front of the other and train for this thing that may or may not happen, but I'm just going to hope that it does. And it seemed so crazy at the time because when the Olympics got postponed and when COVID happened, it seemed like the end of my world. I was like, this is the worst thing to ever happen. And then a year and a half later, as I'm standing there getting my bronze medal, I'm like, I wouldn't have gotten that bronze if it weren't for the pandemic happening. I wouldn't have had that extra year and a half. I wouldn't have gone from being someone who was just happy to make the Olympic team to someone who stood on the start line of the Olympics believing that they could win a medal.
So you don't think you could have won
No.
or medaled in 2020?
Definitely not. I think I was so new to it, and what the pandemic gave me was just so many months of consistent training and also learning to believe in myself a lot more. I think I was so new to marathoning and I was just so happy to be there at the trials that it was such a shock when I made the team. And over that next year and a half, I feel like I really grew and I started to see that I wasn't just someone who was lucky to make the team. I was someone who belonged there. And I worked so damn hard that whole year and a half. And I'm like, I've worked way too hard to not go for it in Sapporo.
So you're standing at the starting line of that Olympic marathon. Did you feel at that moment that you had a chance to finish on the podium? And when in the race did it dawn on you that it was going to happen for you?
Yeah, I think I knew the couple days leading into it, I was starting to get that excitement and that feeling. And I called my sister and my brother the night before, and I hadn't said it to anyone yet. I hadn't even vocalized it to myself, but like I told them, like, yeah, like I think if things go right tomorrow, I could win a medal, but like everything would have to go perfectly. And it was
told me this morning, you told them you're either going to get a medal or go to the hospital.
Yes,
right? One or the other.
Medal or hospital was the race plan.
And hospital was a real possibility because it was like 100 degrees.
It was 100 degrees and 90% humidity. It was one of the most insane races I've ever run. But it was really freeing to get there after, like, it was so stressful going into the Olympics because we're in a full quarantine all week. We couldn't leave our hotel rooms except to run around a 400-meter concrete track. I ran 90 miles on a 400-meter concrete track that week. And through all the struggles of what we'd been through, I got to the starting line and I was just filled with such gratitude and such excitement because I knew that the minute that gun went off and the minute I crossed the start line, I would get to call myself an Olympian. It didn't matter what happened after that. I'm like, no matter what, today is already a success. I get to get my rings tattoo and I get to call myself an Olympian. Everything else is just icing on the cake after this. And I feel like that really opened me up to be able to go and do something that frankly was a little bit crazy at the time. Like if I'd really thought through what I was doing of running with like two of the top runners in the world, one of whom is the world record holder, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have like anywhere thought I should be up there. But I'm like, hey, this is all just bonus. Why not go for it? I'm playing with house money.
And so that race proceeds. It is hot. People are struggling. At what point did you realize, oh my God, I'm actually going to finish on the podium here?
It came late. I knew with about 6 miles to go that I was going to finish very high up. But we were in a pack of about 5 women, and it was loops. And my coach and my best friend, John, was there at the point at the bottle station on the far end of the course. And every lap he got progressively more and more frantic until basically when I came past him on that final lap with about 5 miles to go, he was just nonverbal and just screaming. And I don't even know what he screamed. And it was seeing him getting so excited that it clicked for me that I'm like, something really special is happening right now. But it was definitely a little bit of fear knowing that by that point there were 4 of us in the group. I'm like, one of us is going home very sad. And 3 of these women are all sub 220 marathoners, and this is my 3rd race, and I have a feeling I'm going to be the one going home sad. And with about 3 miles to go, I had fallen into 4th. And Salpeter, who's an Israeli athlete, she was starting to gap me a little bit, and I could see her, it slipping away, and I was going as hard as I possibly could in that heat. And I'm like, you know what? I just have to believe that she played her hand too soon and that I'm sticking to my race plan. I'm doing what I'm doing. I just have to hope that she's bluffing right now. And she was, because she started walking. And it was then that I was like, well, you're getting a medal. Just hold it together. And those last 2 miles were so cool because you're obviously so miserable. I was like hallucinating. It was so hot. But it like coming through and I was just like, wow, like I've worked my entire life to get here and this is really happening right now. And then the final 400 meters, when it really hit, I just started screaming. So
Amazing, amazing. That's a moment that not many people get to have. So incredible for you.
It's something that I honestly kind of never thought was going to happen to me. So it was pretty cool.
How did that race change your life, change your relationship to running, physically, mentally? What's different for you since that race?
I think that race proved to me that no matter what happens, that like I do belong here. I think like I said before, I really struggle with the self-confidence aspect of a lot of this. And being able to be 30 seconds behind the world record holder, it kind of clicked in my mind of like, hey, like you're really good at one thing in this world, and it's running. And you need to be able to believe that like you belong up there and you can race really hard. I might not be one of the fastest runners out there, but I know that like I can stick my nose in things and I can go for it when it gets really tough. And so no matter what I go through in my career, I can kind of always fall back on that of knowing like, hey, like I do deserve to be here regardless of what happens.
You since that time have talked about both physical, I know you're dealing with some injuries, we'll talk about that in a second, but also mental challenges. Is that what it comes down to, is your ability to convince yourself that you belong on these stages? There's something called imposter syndrome that people go through. I go through that sometimes. Like, wait a second, I'm the CEO of this thing. Like, do I really belong here? Should I really be here? Like, this can't really be, right? And a lot of people go through that. Is that something you find yourself going through?
Oh, very much so. I think no matter what level you get to, it's always going to be like the talking heads, like, how did I get here? It's just like, it's that sense of just like, you start to look around and you're just like, what choices did I make to end up like being in the position that I'm in? Like this all started out because I really wanted to run track with my church, and like all of a sudden I'm like standing on an Olympic podium and I'm getting to race all over the world. And I still see myself in many ways as that 7th grader. But I think sometimes it's really a matter of just faking until you make it, of just like, you have to not think about it too much and just kind of ride that wave. I really like the surfer Kelly Slater, and he had a great quote that I really enjoyed of just like, he said basically, you can't choose the wave that you get. The wave is coming at you, and you can think about it too much and you can fall, or you can accept the wave that you've been given and just ride it out. And I feel sometimes that's what I'm doing. I'm like, I don't understand how I got lucky enough to be able to have this career that also happens to be the thing that I love to do most in the world, but I'm just going to ride it as long as I possibly can.
Yeah, it's that reacting sometimes to what you've been given versus thinking too much about it. That's incredible. So you've had some injuries lately. I know you were planning on running a spring marathon this year. That didn't happen. Tell us a bit about where you are now.
Yeah, so this spring was super frustrating because I came off, last year was an incredibly difficult year. I just dealt with a lot of mental health struggles coming off of the Olympics, and I truly believe in the mind-body connection. And so when my brain went, the body started to go as well. So I spent basically a full year getting kind of the train back on the rails, and went into 2023 feeling so confident, feeling really ready, had a great marathon build. And 2 weeks before the marathon, I tore my glute. And it's so frustrating to get so close to a goal and have all of this confidence and like belief in yourself again after a tough year, and have it all, the rug just kind of pulled out from under you. But the longer I'm in this sport, the more it is that I realize that no matter what level you get to, there's always going to be the setbacks. And I think everybody who runs knows this. No matter what you achieve, there's always going to be that next setback that's going to happen. And all this sport is just how you adapt to those setbacks. In the same way that when you get into a race and it starts really sucking, that point is always going to come. It's your attitude and how you get over that. So I've had a lot of injuries in my career. And so this period now where I'm going through these injuries, I'm like, you know what? I've been through this before. I've been through far worse injuries than I'm dealing with now. And I got through it then. It's like, it puts a lot of things in perspective.
The challenges, the mental health challenges that someone in your position has are a lot different than the challenges that a recreational runner or someone who just likes to go out. But do you see some things in common? I mean, what's your advice for someone who is struggling mentally, whether it's with running or with bigger issues, and how to make running part of the solution for them?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is because so many people deal with mental health struggles. I personally deal with really severe ADHD that expresses itself in many different ways. And I think the biggest thing that I've had to learn over time is that the act of mindfulness is not just, that's not just a thing that people say. I know that's kind of the hot buzzword now. They're like, be mindful. And you're like, what does that even mean? But I think mindfulness at its core means paying attention to what is going on in your own mind, not disassociating, not trying to shove it down. I think a lot of times in the past, I have used running as a way to try and numb myself and to ignore the things that are going on. And then I run really badly because of it, because I'm using running for the wrong means. But when I'm actually paying attention to what's going on in my brain and giving those feelings space, it allows myself to be a little bit more in touch and present with what's going on in my mind. And that's when my running is at its best, because I'm accepting who I am and the fact that my brain, the chemicals are a little bit off in a certain way, but running helps make things a little bit more normal. So when I can use running in a healthy way like that and be mindful actively, I think that is when I'm working at my best.
I love that. That's incredible. We're going to give you guys a chance to ask Molly some questions, so start thinking of your questions right now. What you said speaks to me so much, right? It's easy in some ways to do that in the context of running because you have a limited time horizon. You're running 10K.
Yeah.
And, at some point in that race, it hits you, wow, I'm really in pain right now. I really don't feel good right now. I really want to stop right now, right? But you know that there is a finish line, that you will get there. Sometimes in life, you don't know where the finish line is. You didn't know when COVID was going to end. You didn't know when the Olympics were going to happen. You don't always have that clear certainty. But if you believe that it will end, right, that there will be, a transition, a finish line, that's a lot of what I think people need at times, and maybe that's something that can translate from running.
Yeah, and I think as well too, because in so many things you're never going to have that certainty. I think a lot of us runners are very type A, very anal retentive, and we want that certainty. We want that certainty to know if I do X, X, and X workouts, I'm going to get this result out. And I think more than anything, running has taught me to let go of that a little bit and to sometimes celebrate the fact that you're just not going to know. And that's what makes running cool. Before the Olympic trials, I was not on paper supposed to make that team. Nobody was picking Molly Seidel to be on the 2020 Olympic marathon team. And I had a really great conversation with my friend who I was living with at the time, that he was saying basically, if running was just putting times into a computer and then getting your race result out at the end, this would be the most boring sport in the world. But it's the fact that you're never going to know what's going to happen on the day. And there's that little bit of magic that goes into this, that crazy things can happen. That's why we do this. That's what makes it fun. And knowing that, hey, some really special things can happen if you just believe. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but in my career, it keeps showing itself again and again that sometimes it doesn't make sense and you just got to go with it.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Questions from Molly Seidel. I know there's some out there.
And anything's on the table. You can ask me anything.
Roll them all out there. Who wants to be first? Yes, in the back. I'll repeat the question for folks online. The question was, you've said you had a tendency to struggle with self-confidence, but can that actually work in your favor sometimes because you actually push yourself harder?
Yes, but I think in a different way necessarily than that. Like, I don't necessarily go into things with like a chip in my shoulder, or believing that I have to prove myself. I think where it's helped me is that I don't necessarily put expectations on things. Like, I don't see myself necessarily as like, oh, you are an XXX runner. And because of that, I think it's opened up a lot more possibilities for me. Like, going into the Olympics, I didn't necessarily think, okay, you have to win a medal, you have to do this. Because I think if someone had said beforehand, like, hey, you're going to come away with a bronze medal, I wouldn't have even believed that of myself at a certain point. But by not holding those things, like, you have endless opportunities. Even, I'm trying to think, I'm not saying this in the right way, but if you had told me in 2019, what are your goals for the next year? I wouldn't have even put on paper of making the Olympic team in the marathon. It's like that hadn't even occurred to me in my mind yet. But not even putting those expectations of what I could run if I ran a marathon, it freed me to go and do something crazy at trials. Because I didn't see myself, oh, you're a top 20 runner at trials. I would have shut myself down for ever going for second in that race. So I think that's it. I think sometimes we can put these limiting beliefs on ourselves with the expectations that we hold.
Sometimes low expectations can be a beautiful thing.
Oh,
right?
I think low expectations are the key to happiness.
I have said that exact same thing many times.
I was just hoping to finish the New York City Marathon when I stepped to that line. When I came across and they're like, you ran the American course record, I was just as shocked as anyone. I thought Sam was messing with me.
That's a good lesson for runners out there. Low expectations. That's the key to happiness. I like that a lot. Other questions for Molly? Yes.
So I'm a big fan of your Instagram account. Love following it. And I'm curious, as you become a more public person and persona, how do you find that balance of what to share and not? And then do you kind of think about like, oh, there's some, mom in New York City who thinks this is awesome and it's a run, or do you just sort of post it and kind of go on with your day?
The question is,
It's really great in a lot of ways.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
thank you. The question for those online is about Molly's social channels and how she kind of thinks about what to post.
Yeah, I think I struggle with social media sometimes because it is realizing like how many people are seeing it now, and the way that my brain works, I always focus on the negative. Obviously, that like when I like last year when I first went public about my ADHD diagnosis and my decision to try out medication for a while, I got so much negative feedback, and so for me, it's really hard sometimes getting that of just like hearing firsthand just how many people react really negatively to things. So in my mind, it always comes across as this super negative thing, and I rail against social media. But then when I see the people that it really that really enjoy it, that it affects really positively, it really lifts me up because I feel like a lot of what I post is very genuine and very just like off the cuff. Like I try to post as if it still is only my same 200 friends from Boston that are following that account, rather than, I don't know what it is, like 200,000 now. And so it's like, I try to go into it with the same level of just being really genuine and just putting out there what I would want my friends to see, rather than something super like curated. Obviously, I have to like promote my sponsors on there, and it is to some degree like an account for like the business side of Molly. But I think if I'm like connecting with people in a really genuine way and people are finding it funny and self-effacing, that's what I would hope to do with that account. So thank you for following too.
Yes.
Hi.
How much of your runs are like fun runs where you're like getting back in shape, getting back in touch with your body versus like these are my training runs that I'm doing professionally? How do you kind of seg between the two?
Ooh, so generally, like in a week, we're like, it depends on the training cycle that I'm in. So we'll have like, I do a lot of runs in the week. When I'm in full marathon training, it's around 130 miles. So of those miles, a lot of them are easy. And then we'll have like Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays are like our specific days. So those are days where we have a very specific goal for the run. It's usually a workout, a long run, something very focused. The other times, I'm going out, I'm running with my friends, I'm running with my dog, I'm on the trails, I'm on the roads of Flagstaff, I'm having fun with it. And I think the really cool thing about running is that it opens you up to being able to have all of these cool experiences that you wouldn't have. For example, just this past Sunday, I was in Munich the last week or so, and I was doing my long run, and I noticed that the whole road was shut down. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And then thousands of runners started coming at me. They basically shut down all the roads for like an open, like community, like charity run. So I just ended up doing like 5 miles of my long run with all of these people on the ring road around Munich. And it was so cool because there were like thousands of people out cheering. There were like bands playing and like drum lines going. And it was so wild. And I'm like, this is what makes me love this sport, is because like I can be a pro athlete that like this is objectively my job to go out and do a long run today. But I also go and get to just have so much fun. Like there's nothing in the world I would have rather been doing than just running with like people that I'll probably never see again around Germany. Like it was so cool. I love my job. So I know that was a long-winded answer to it, but I have a lot of fun with my training. So probably like 80% of my runs in the week.
Amazing. You were shining when you were talking about the music experience.
These people had no idea who they were running with either. They're just like running along. It's a fun run. And oh, this is an Olympic medalist. Who knew?
Well, there was like little kids on scooters that were like dusting me. I'm like, dang, I got to get a scooter. That looks really fun.
Yes, pass the mic over, please. Thanks.
Hi. I've been running for a while, but I just registered for my first full marathon.
Woo! Yeah.
It's their fault. I'm really scared. Do you have any words of wisdom for a first-time marathoner? Maybe a mantra I could keep in mind?
I think the best thing I can say is like embrace that feeling of being a rookie and of not knowing. Like, obviously, it can be really stressful going into your first race and just not knowing what's ahead, but kind of like what I said before of just like letting go of the expectation and just freeing yourself up to go and do something even just a little bit crazy, because running a marathon is objectively crazy. Like the first person who did it died. So like every one of us who does this is objectively crazy. But it's like you're going to get into that race and you're going to feel something that you've never felt before. Like that's how I felt doing my first marathon at the trials, of being like 16 miles in and being like, I have never raced it. Like right now is the farthest I've ever raced in my life, and I still have 10 miles to go. And just being like, I have no idea what's ahead, but I just have to know that like I trust my body. I trust that I'm gonna get there. And I know, like, you know it's gonna be hard, but know that you're going to finish that race and be so hooked on it. Like, that's all I can say. Like, I'm so excited for you because, like, marathoning is so freaking cool, and you're going to be obsessed after this. So, like, just go into it knowing that, like, you aren't going to know until you've done it. And just every step of that way is going to be something new and cool and exciting that you're never going to get to experience being a rookie like that again, and just savor it. And you're going to be really sore afterwards, too. So I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
Is it New York that you're going to be running?
No, I signed up for California International
California,
Marathon.
okay.
Nice.
Best of luck to you. Other questions for Molly?
What is the pro running life like? Like, do you have pro runner friends that you can talk to about the stresses and the mental health kind of issues you may have with getting ready to compete, facing injury? Or is it something, you know, it's your competitor, and so you're not going to talk about, I have this thing that's bothering me, or I have this, you know, mental health issue that could be used against somebody against you, possibly that's competing against you?
So I think the coolest thing about pro running is, I think it's probably pretty different from most other pro sports in that the pro runner community is incredibly tight knit. Like, the women that I race against are my best friends. And that has been such a cool thing for me to get to have in my life of, I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is a huge hub for pro running in the U.S. Like a huge percentage of pro runners either live there full time or go out there for training stints. And so I interact with the vast majority of my competitors on a daily basis. And there's such an openness to being able to talk about what we're going through, the struggles. Even when I was coming up through and developing as a marathoner, like I was like, my main competitor was Olympian, and we did so much of our training going into the Olympics, training together, knowing full well that when we stepped to the line, we were going to go at each other, like no holds barred. But she gave me just so much good life advice. She's a little bit older than I am, and she's been through this. And the conversations that we would have about like my fears, her worries coming back from pregnancy, to run the Olympic marathon, it kind of opened my eyes to be like, what I love about women's running in particular is that there is that vulnerability and that openness that I feel like many other sports don't have. Even like a couple nights before the Olympic marathon, like Alphine knew that she wasn't probably going to finish that race. She had really injured her hip. And she told me, she's like, I'm going to do everything I can in this race to make sure that you win a medal. And it was that being just like, wow, like I've never really felt this before, of just like knowing that this person who is objectively my competitor is fully in my corner. And I think that's what's really cool about pro running and that I love.
There is something special about running. It's like your opponent is the distance in a way, right? It's the race. I'm pretty sure Serena Williams and Maria Sharapova weren't like hanging out sharing their vulnerabilities before they played a final at Wimbledon. So there's something special about that.
Yeah, and I love that it's like you can be on the race course and like battling someone, and the minute you cross that finish line, it is just hugs. Like I actually got in a lot of trouble when I raced London in 2020 because Sarah Hall was there and she got second place in the race. And when I crossed the finish line and I saw her with the second place on, we technically weren't allowed to go within 6 feet of anyone. Like they put beepers on us that would alarm if you went close to anyone. And I got in a lot of trouble because I saw her and I run up to her. I waddled because I had just run a marathon. And I grabbed her face and started like screaming because I was so excited, and they had to like pull me off of her. But it's like, it's that excitement of just being able to like immediately feel so much joy for the people around you. Like that's what's really cool. So yes, we are all friends.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a really, all of these are long.
It was great. It was a great question. It's a great question. Other questions from Molly? I don't know where we are on time. I could do this all night with Molly, so someone will have to wave at me when I'm supposed to stop. Got a question in front here.
I have one. I've run a lot of marathons myself. And it's very similar to you in that never thought that I would really like fully accomplish like marathon and feel like comfortable doing it. And it wasn't until I started running some ultras, and then that put it into perspective of making it feel like a shorter distance. So I was curious to know, do you have any plans to run anything beyond the marathon?
No.
Wait, do you want to think about that?
No, I will say my boyfriend does ultras. Tomorrow when I get back, he will be in the middle of a 125-mile race. And seeing him run ultras has only further established in my mind that I don't want to go farther than 26 miles. I'm one of those people that like, I fully believe that the 5K is the hardest distance to run.
Yes.
I don't necessarily, kudos to you for running ultras.
Thanks.
I personally think that it's about like, you can go as intense as you want with any of these things. Heck, you can make a mile race the hardest like race you want. It's not about the distance, it's about how hard you go. But I still don't want to run 100 miles ever. ever.
I completely agree with you about the 5K. I think it is, for you, it's probably like 15 minutes of torture. For me, it's like 20-something minutes of torture because you are going so fast, pushing your limit for, a reasonably long period of time.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to do.
Oh, 100%. It's just like, if anything, like that's why I run the marathon, because I don't want to have to suffer as bad as I do in a 5K.
Yeah, it's brutal. All right, we'll go one last question, I think, from Molly. Yes, in front.
So, if you're not going to run longer than a marathon, what would you say your favorite distance race is, and why?
the marathon is definitely my favorite distance. Like running my first marathon and being in that race of being like, oh yeah, this is what I'm meant to do. Like it was such a cool feeling to just feel that clicking and just being like, I love this. But I think with that, like I love the challenge of the shorter distances. Like I love a road 5K, I love a road 10K because I'm not necessarily as good at it. Like it just is such a fun thing to like be in that and just be getting dusted by people and be like, I want to get better at this. So like that's the cool thing about running is there's always room to improve. There's always something new to do. So I don't know. I heard there's a 10K here in New York in a couple
There
of months.
is a 10K, the mini 10K coming up, which you've run before.
I have.
So we may have to talk about that.
I know.
Yeah. I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. All right. So I was gonna ask you about your plans and where we might see you this fall. So now you've had this spring that didn't quite go as planned.
Yeah.
What about the fall marathon season?
Fall marathon season, I am definitely very excited to get to focus on that a bit. That was some of the rationale of not trying to like come back from this glute injury too quickly and worry like, okay, like everything this year is to try and set up for 2024 of the Olympic trials and the Olympics. And so the race that we choose in the fall will have to be early enough that we can still come back around for a February Olympic trials. But then also doing some shorter races and working on a little bit of that speed and that just like that race knowledge. I think like people sometimes like can discount the like how important it is to just have like a good race sense. And so I love getting to do some of these shorter, fast, hard races because it really teaches you how to race aggressively. So I think we're gonna do some shorter stuff, have some fun with it, and then we'll see. An earlier fall marathon. I'd love to do New York, but might be a little too late for me this year.
And then before you know it, it's going to be 2024, an Olympics Games coming up in Paris. You will not quite have that luxury of low expectations
Yeah.
going into the 2024 Olympic trials. How are you going to approach that? Obviously, it depends on your physical health, but how much are you thinking about that now, and how will your approach have to be different because you've been there and you've done that?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult, it's a difficult thing to balance of knowing that there are these sky high expectations, not only that other people hold, but that I hold myself, and knowing that the U.S. team is the hardest team in the world to make. And a lot of how we hold our trials is kind of wild that it's like, okay, you have to be ready on that one day. So I think being able to go into it, feeling confident and knowing like, hey, anything can happen, nothing is guaranteed, but if I can go into that race as well prepared as I possibly can, feeling really good mentally and physically, like I have as good a shot as anyone, just having confidence in that and going back and being able to like have that confidence of knowing like, yeah, I am good at this. I love this more than anything in the world. Regardless of how that day goes, all I can do is just race my hardest and see how it comes out.
Is it possible to dial back the expectations, right? Can you find a way to put out of your mind, yes, I made the Olympics in 2021. Yes, I won a bronze medal. Yes, all that happened, but I'll still be amazed if I make this team. I'll still be amazed if I'm, competitive in the Olympics.
I think you can't ever put that genie back in the bottle once it comes out. It's always going to be there. But I think knowing that you're never going to repeat history. Like, I'm never going to get to go back to that spot where it's my first marathon, that there's no expectations, that I'm just going out there and having fun. And I would never want to repeat that too, because everyone knows like the band that they keep just putting out the same album every time. You're like, do something different. It's like Radiohead didn't try to like make the same album. They realized, okay, it's going to be different going forward. I'm a different person. I have a different approach to this. And so when I go and step to the line of trials, it's going to be a new thing. And just trying to relish in that of knowing like, hey, like I've grown a lot since 2020 and I've been through a lot of different things, and I'm going to take all that knowledge and approach this race in a different way and not try to remake history. I'm trying to make something new and cool.
Lastly, before I end this conversation, I want to go back to the root of our conversation here, which is running and mental health. This morning, we heard from a guy who had an incredible story, Zach Clark, who had struggled with addiction, depression, found running as a way to overcome all of that. The dopamine that he talked about getting, the so-called runner's high, right? That was something that has helped him get over the addiction that he had and all the struggles that he had. And there are people I meet every day in this job who tell me about how they were having a hard time getting out of bed, right? They had been hit with depression or whatever it was, and running has really been a game changer for them. What's your advice to someone who is struggling out there, whether they're not a runner and maybe they're thinking about starting it, or they are a runner, in terms of what running can do for them in getting them to a better place?
Yeah. I think running and just physical activity in general is such an important part of overall health and mental health in particular. And for all of this, like, it helps me to take this kind of view of it, of the brain chemistry that you're born with is not your fault. The environment that you're exposed to is not your fault. The trauma that you experience is not your fault. However, it is your responsibility to do everything in your power to make sure that your brain functions as well as it can. Nobody is going to do that for you. And running and taking that personal autonomy over your own health is one way of taking that initiative back and taking that responsibility of saying, hey, I can't control the things that I've been exposed to or the reason why my brain is the way that it is, but I can control how I react to it. And so running is just one part of the whole picture of it. Sleeping well, eating well, connecting to people around you, seeking help that you can get. I think it's this multifaceted approach that allows you to feel like you have that autonomy to control the way that your brain works in a slightly more positive way and change the way that you move through the world.
I can't say how much I have enjoyed talking to you. I'm so pleased that you came and joined us, told some of your story. And no offense to any other American marathon runners out there, but I will be rooting for you to get back to the Olympics in 2024 because you're such an inspiration, and I really want to thank you for being here. Molly Seidel.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Molly's going to hang around, take some photos, say hello. So come on up and meet Molly Seidel. And thank you all very much for being here. Thanks for those of you online who joined us. We'll see you next time.